guys, this is my interview with Jennifer. And just a little introduction to her. She is an artist. She's a local artist from Colorado, and she does something really interesting, which I found just amazing. And she basically, especially with her new collection named Same Mind, she mixes her Zen practice with her artwork. And I found that really interesting since the very first time I met her. So enjoy this interview, guys, and there's a little bit more coming. I asked her some fashion questions, and that will be on the next video as well. Enjoy. Tell me a little bit about, I guess your childhood,
Oh, interesting.
your history. I'm curious. I always ask everyone.
Yeah, that's fine.
How were you when you were younger?
Mm-hmm.
And then how did you get to this point in your life? It's okay if it's long.
Okay. From sort of I'll call it McBuddhism. There's sort of Buddhism light that is sort of a translation of some of the beliefs of Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those lighter sides of the philosophy of Buddhism is that we choose our parents.
Yes. Oh,
or to make it more general, we choose the condition into which we're born.
Yeah.
Because there's a lesson for us.
Mm-hmm.
My father was 26 years older than my mother. 26 years. She had me when she was 38 and he was 60. Yeah, so they would have been, so it'd been like, there was like 26 years between them. I'd have to do the math, but it's something like that, right?
Yeah.
3 and 5, 20, yeah, right. And I was his only child and I was her only child. And then he died when I was 3.5. And I had no siblings. So I was raised an only child. My mother never remarried. And she died of lung cancer when I was in my 30s. So I was left I was pretty much alone anyway, because after my father died, I certainly was not ignored by my mother. As an Italian, as somebody who's Latin, you will understand this.
Yes.
Is that if anything, whether you're doted upon, doting, like a doting parent, whether they're doting on you in a good way or they're doting on you in a bad way, they're doting. And so to get away from that doting is incredibly liberating.
Yes.
So when my mother passed away of lung cancer, I finally got to move out to this part of the country where I had wanted to live since I was 18. If she hadn't passed away, I would have never been allowed psychologically to be out here. And if my father had been alive, my life would have taken a very different turn, at least according to my mother, which I tend to believe. And so I did that actually for a little bit in Chicago. But I'm fiercely independent, but I think I was born that way.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I don't believe that it was developed because of my childhood. I think I came into the world knowing that I was going to do this. And it's funny that you asked this question because when I was in high school, my high school counselor, whose name I remember to this day, Mr. Dobrath at Taft High School in Chicago, they were doing career counseling. And he said, where do you want to go to school? And I said, I want to go to the School of the Art Institute. And he said, there is no such thing. And I said, yes, there is. And he said, I can't find it. And I said, fine, I'll do it myself. I was a first generation student. No one else had gone to college in my family. So I had no siblings. I had a mother who I would never say that she didn't take care of me, but she was very absent after my father died. Not that she wasn't around, but emotionally. She was emotionally absent for me. I did everything on my own. I had no help, no siblings, no family, to speak of. I had a very, they were all up in years. And being an artist, coming from an Italian family, because my father died when I was 3.5, and he was so much older that there was no Kiessings left. So I was raised as an Italian. Madonna, as my grandmother would say. First generation, no one to tell you how to go to college. When I think back, I don't know how I do not know how I did it. Other than this is what I was going to do. And so when you say, how did you get here? I would say, from a dharmic perspective, this is what I was supposed to be right here. So, I didn't have any help. I knew that I wanted to be an artist. It sort of takes us back to, because really, it was by 6th grade that I made this connection. And from then on, and I always say this, because I have done it in other interviews, I was raised by the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I was raised by the faculty there, who to this day I still love tremendously because they got me when I was 16. And so any success that I have belongs to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and any failures are my own. But they really raised me.
I totally understand.
They really raised me. And so I was raised in this tremendous environment of all of these educators who were brilliantly formally trained artists and gave of their time just unconditionally. And so that's what I was taught. So that's something that I totally believe in. But, I was caught. I was caught by the art world. And actually, it was all because of public programming and museum education, which they always say, right, that museum education, the younger someone is involved in looking at art, the more likely they are to at least be involved or to pay attention to the arts. But I was brainwashed at an early age.
That's cool. So then, were you always a good artist, drawing, or did it take you a while to get the proper techniques and all that stuff?
It always takes a while. You know what I mean? Because first you have to learn all the rules. And then you learn how to break them. And when I was in school at the Art Institute, in education in general, there are different philosophies that dominate at different times. And so when I was at the School of the Art Institute in the 1980s, there was no foundations program, which you're learning because where you're at school, you have to do a little bit of everything. When I was in school, they didn't have foundations. You just went right to what you wanted to do. So in one way, that was really great. But in another way, unless you were curious as a student, you wouldn't do anything else. So I definitely did a number of things. I did ceramics. Painting was my major. Painting and drawing was my major. And I really stuck with that for the time that I was there. And so you just keep working and you see things that are interesting and you see things that are new, and they had a wonderful visiting artist program, so you're exposed to a lot of other things beside painting and drawing, so the option is there. But when I was in school, as I say, there was no foundations program, so I didn't do everything. I really focused on drawing and painting for the most part, and that skill level is just built over time.
Okay. So you okay. So tell me a little bit about drawing. I'm going to school right now for fashion, and in some of the drawing classes, it's really, it can get difficult drawing something perfectly. Can you just explain to me a little bit about, drawing and how that plays into an artist's mind? Because if you can't put your ideas into paper, draw them or design them or whatever, then what do you have? Can you just explain to me a little bit about that?
Practice, right? Like eye-hand coordination. And what I say, for example, because I teach, what I always say to my students is you can only draw so many apples before it gets pretty boring, right? And then everybody's drawing an apple. And ideally, everybody's apple should have its own personality. But generally speaking, people who are not really educated in the arts, because a little bit of art education is a very dangerous thing, right? Because there are art schools and there's advanced teaching and there's studio practice. And so it is a field and it's a discipline. And a lot of people don't engage with it that way. But in fact, that's what it is. And there's also a lot of scholarship involved, a lot of research that's necessary. So just being able to draw and having the skill to execute a perfectly drawn apple is nothing. Really? Is nothing. Because if you don't have a mind and an idea and are a thinker, especially in the time that we're living, because whether we like it or not, times have changed dramatically, and the artwork that we see now is highly technological. I'm doing something that's super analog, but that is not what a lot of work is. It's film, it's video, it's performance, it's multidisciplinary, it's actually transdisciplinary, it's beyond all disciplines, and it's post-disciplinary. So people don't even have one thing that they do. So drawing and being able to draw, frankly, is not, I'm going to make a huge jump here. Ultimately, in the 21st century, depending on the type of work that you choose to make, it is not even necessary. Really? It is not necessary. It is a skill that is important, but there are artists who could make work who would never know how to draw, who would be very successful. Because skill is one thing. Being a great conceptual thinker, the skill is in the concept.
Actually, like we're talking about the mind.
Yes.
Why did you call it Same Mind? So you're
so the show that's coming up in February is called Same Mind, and it's called Same Mind. If you saw that video, and there are two videos on my website, so you may have seen the older one, depending on when you looked at it. The same mind concept comes from the fact that I'm doing these drawings now. And I was 2 years ago doing line drawings, freehand line drawings. And all of those were you could refer to them, I'm referring to them just for the sake of description, as white drawings, because the drawing was on white paper. And then I went to these all over graphite drawings, and people could look at them and they could say, oh, well, these are very different than the all white drawings, but they really aren't. They're exactly the same. They're line.
Are they white lines?
Oh, are these? No, these are, because, all of these are, a lot of these were different colors, right? So some are red, some are blue, some are gray, and then they're erased. All of my line drawings are erased, and some of them are erased and drawn over. And so these are also all drawn and erased and drawn and erased and drawn and erased. So essentially the white drawings are made exactly the same way as these graphite drawings are made. But one could say that they look really different. So the point is that the same mind created what some people may think of as two very different types of work, but they're exactly the same.
Explain to me a little bit about the meditations. Like, what's your process when you're your whole process, especially the Zen?
What's the relationship of the Zen?
Yes.
It ultimately is about time. And that you're in the moment. And that's such a funky phrase because everybody's using that, and we're living currently at a time that's all about meditation. Everybody's meditating and everybody's contemplative. And there's a lot of discussion at all different levels, at the highest art levels, at, community-based levels, it's all over. I think that this is actually something that needs to be examined, which is what this show is about, is the phrase is aesthetic inquiry, right? Yeah. Aesthetic being, making your work, and questioning this relationship between what we think is contemplative and what actually is contemplative, and what the audience response is to that. And so when I'm working, my process is about focusing on what I'm drawing. It's not about my mind wandering off somewhere, thinking about what I'm going to eat for lunch, or, that I need a cup of coffee. It's about working on that piece for the time that I'm there. And there is nothing before it, and there's nothing after it. There's only that moment. So those lines, no matter what drawing it is, all those lines are done with my focusing only on that line. Whether it's lines like this, which are erased and then drawn again, and disappear entirely, so you just have a graphite surface, or if they're the ones that are the white drawings that have individual lines that have been drawn over time, each line being focused on independently and repeated over and over and over and over again, and then just deciding when to stop. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's super simple. Ultimately, I'm drawing a line and I'm erasing it. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so there are all these questions that can come up as a result of that, or viewpoints, or judgments, or whatever you would want to say. However, because I'm in the moment and I'm just drawing, the energy of that, I hope, is embodied in that sheet of paper. Because ultimately, if there's nothing before and nothing after, there's only that moment. And it's only my energy. It's not about any specific thought. It's about my physical, recording my physical being. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so it's a practice. But I am a Zen practitioner. So one of the things that is happening a lot is there's a lot of discussion about artists, and I'm working with a very specific tradition. The show that I'm doing in February is looking at the work of D.T. Suzuki, who brought Zen Buddhism to the United States. Another artist by the name of Ad Reinhardt, who is a devout abstract painter, but is categorized often as an abstract expressionist painter. And then a woman named Agnes Martin, who is also categorized as an abstract expressionist painter. So ultimately, the work is about emotion. Abstract expressionism is about emotion. This work is an effort to make abstract expressionism in the moment based on a practice that is not about getting lost in thought, but staying in the present moment. Which does not mean that there's no subject matter. It means the subject matter is my movement at that moment.
And so, how does that tie into Zen? Like the practices in Zen Buddhism, where's like the tie or the connection?
The connection is in the process of making the work being similar to the sitting practice, which ultimately, when one is engaged in a meditative process, it's not la la land, it's not zoning out, it's not escaping, it's being very grounded in the moment in which you exist. And being aware of your breathing until you're not aware of your breathing anymore and you're just in the space. You haven't zoned out. And so this process is exactly the same thing. The difference is that when you're in sitting practice, you are not moving at all. So there's a particular stillness. And this, of course, is engaged with a lot of moving. But what's happening in the mind is the same thing. So whether your body is still or whether you're making these objects, these drawings, your mind is focused and in the present and not thinking of the past and not thinking about the future. That ultimately, my teacher, Genzan Cannell, talks about time in this beautiful way. And one of the things that he teaches very clearly is that in the practice of breathing and in the practice of Zen, every moment you are starting over. Your life starts over with every new breath, which is a stunning thought. In fact, it's mind stopping. It's not mind numbing. But if one realizes, as he says, each moment is new and fresh and is not about the past and not about the future, and ultimately gives us as individuals the opportunity to start over. Because each breath has never been taken before. And once that breath is taken, it's gone. Right?
Oh my gosh, I'm totally having like a Zen moment right now as you're saying that. Oh wow. Yeah.
So
it's okay to be whatever you're thinking. There's no rules here.
I know. It's two things, and obviously it's around art. It's around art and Buddhist practice. And I guess it's not what I know, but it's what I believe should be focused on. One is true perception. And the other is non-attachment, or keeping your ego in check. Because it's important to have an ego. It's not to say, because an ego makes one survive. Okay, so there's that. But understanding its place and the importance of, on a daily basis, constantly giving over to the universe and not assuming or feeling that you in any way are holding any sort of anything over anybody or anything. I mean, it's a super general response, but it's about power and manipulation and intention. Don't assume you have any power because you don't. Or maybe I should say it this way: I don't assume that I have any power because I don't. I believe that I always should be trying to find the truest perception that I can. And that interconnectedness is beyond this sort of superficial McBuddhism, right? Because now we're living at this time that's really big, this McDharma. Because a little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous thing. And that it's super important not to think that anything I do is of great relevance. And that doesn't have to do with self-esteem. That's not what I'm talking about. It's something that I can't articulate. It's a feeling. But, it's not all that. And I'm certainly not all that. Yeah. And people lie to themselves. And if you wouldn't lie to yourself, if I should put it in the, if I don't lie, If I do not lie to myself, I will be of much greater benefit as a human being on this earth than if I do lie to myself.
Mhm.
And that's the knowledge that I think I've gained. And I believe it's really important to pass that on. It comes in many forms, and it doesn't mean it only comes in one form.
Mhm.
That belief can come in many forms, but that's what I think.
And what advice do you give women?
Oh, I heard something the other day that I thought was really interesting. I guess I won't even bother with that. Supporting one another is too loose of a term. That's like too easy. When they say, oh, women should support one another, it's more than that. Invest in one another. I think that women have to invest in one another, and I don't mean that financially. I mean, we met in my studio. You expressed an intense, sincere desire to know about stuff, right? And you're that way about everything. And so there's some people that you go to for some stuff, and then there was stuff that you thought I had.
How do you know that?
My job as a human being is to let you know what stuff I know, right? That's it. And there are people, right? And there's a difference. Give, and this is to women, this is because there are women who are nasty too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Give the stuff to the other women whose intention is sincere. The reason we've developed the relationship we have is because you are totally sincere. And it's interesting because you talk about my energy, your energy is exactly the same. Your energy is totally the same. Your enthusiasm, your interest, your intellectual capacity, all of those things, I want to support, right?
Yeah.
I'm not interested, honestly, in supporting women whose intention is about taking energy and not moving it into the atmosphere. That's so physicky, metaphysical. But we know that. We know the difference between being with someone who drains us or who pretends they're interested, but they're really interested because they almost want to feed off of your joy or of your misery or whatever that is, right? You sort of present this really clean slate. So, support other women who have this really intense desire. I think that that support also requires the fostering of maintaining a humble viewpoint and clear intention. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Because I don't know if it does, but yeah.
It does. Okay. And